everyone, my name is Katrina Kibben and I'm the Director of Marketing for Recruiting Blogs. Thanks for joining our webinar today, How to Become a Data-Driven Recruiter. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our moderators for today's webinar, Ivan Casanova, Chief Marketing Officer at Jibe, and our own Executive Editor, Recruiting Daily, Matt Charney.
All right, great. Thanks, Katrina. And I'm very excited about today's webinar on the Data-Driven Recruiter, which is a very cool initiative that Jibe is working on. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to the man, the myth, and the legend, Mr. Ivan Casanova, to get us kicked off and start talking about why you should care about this big deal that is big data.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for that really overdone introduction. But hello, everyone. My name is Ivan Casanova. I run marketing and product over at Jibe. Today we're going to talk about the use of analytics and data in recruiting. It's a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I know Matt and I have spent a lot of time talking about it. We're going to try to be a little practical here. We're going to talk a little bit about some ideas that folks can take away from this webinar and start to implement in their organization. I think that we're really going to try to give people a way to think about this and a way that those thought processes can actually convert into some meaningful actions in your organizations. And we'll give you some practical examples. If you could, Matt, just go to the next slide. So Matt and I started working on this, a few months back. I came to him with this idea that I felt like there was a lot of information and data that was, available to recruiting and talent acquisition organizations. Yet we really weren't seeing, the clients that we work with at Jibe kind of leveraging that data. And I really kind of was on a mission. I felt like we needed to educate the market. We needed to take a much more aggressive stance. And so, we launched this thing called the Data-Driven Recruiter. Right now it's a blog post. There's a who's who of the industry is on there talking about analytics. You can get to it through www.jibe.com/DDR. You can follow us on Twitter at RecruitDDR. You see the Twitter handle there, where we link and we advertise all the content pieces that we're developing on the site. And the mission is simple, right? Of the Data-Driven Recruiter. We want to educate the marketplace on the use of analytics and data in recruiting. And if that works for you and for your organization, then that's great. And I just really want everybody to be to start using all these amazing tools that are out there, because I think it'll really help. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I think first, Matt, if you go to the next slide. Thanks. We'll try to go to the. I think first what we'll really do is maybe put a pin, I guess, in what the opportunity is here for everybody. We do a lot of surveys at Jibe, every year for the last number of years. There's a lot of other surveys that are out there, and I think it's really clear all the numbers that are out there are all kind of point to one direction, which is that there's a lot of information that is available, and and people are not really leveraging it. And strictly from the types of tools that have been used in the talent acquisition and recruiting world, there's a bunch of tools that people just really don't even like that much, right? I mean, I think I think it's almost become cliche to pound on the ATS, but in general, I think there's most of the technology that is being used in the talent acquisition world is underperforming to the business goals and objectives of the organizations who are investing in these tools. And I think that alone is a really important starting point. We've got to start, as an industry, pushing vendors to make better tools. We have to create an environment where people are listening to the practitioners and listening to the users of these technologies to start to build great tools, because I think that's happening in a lot of other parts of the organizations that you work in the finance organizations and in the sales and marketing, organizations, in the companies that you work in. What we see is they're already using types of tools that especially in the analytics space, that are amazing, right? right? They're using interactive dashboards. They're using big data. They're using all of these ways to aggregate data, and we've got to figure out a way to get this really important function within the companies that we work in to start to have the same type of tools and impact. So, Matt, can we go to the next slide, please? And it isn't even so much that they hate them, right? That's kind of an obvious one, but there's some very specific things here that are going on that I think are really important to touch on. The fact that 2/3 of the people that are surveyed feel that the tools are not intuitive. Most of the people that we surveyed are saying that the tools, can't actually be changed to fit their specific business process or their specific way that they want to work. Most of these people feel like that technology is not doing the one thing that technology is really supposed to do, right? Which is to save us time or to save us money and to make us more effective. So, the technology is not there. And if you go to the next slide, I think this is, kind of a really important launch point for this conversation, because I know sometimes we all kind of get this feeling that we read all this stuff and we hear all this stuff about big data. And I was even, I was actually driving in my car and I heard there's a band named Big Data. Matt, did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So, which means that it's officially a term that has jumped the shark. But the, it seems like a really scary topic for a lot of people. And so, but I know for a fact, because I've talked to a lot of folks in the industry, and they tell me, well, that's just another marketing term, right? It's just another buzzword. It's just another set of tools that aren't going to help me get my job done. Is this just another layer of tools that aren't really going to help me get me where I need to be? And I think that the noise that is being created around big data is just unbelievable. So Matt put this slide together. I love this perspective. I use Google Trends all the time, but it's a really good indicator for what people are searching for, right? Is this something that people really care about? Is this something that is important to them? And I just looking strictly at how that term over the last number of years has started to grow in importance. And you look at this massive set of press coverage that has taken over, where this term is, I could see how a lot of people in our industry would be terrified of this, right? Is this really going to be another thing that I have to worry about? And I think that as it grows in popularity, right, we kind of reach this point where we really have to ask ourselves, what is big data and how is this supposed to help me, right? So the next slide, I think, is a perfect capture of this idea, right? I know everybody's talking about big data. I also know that nobody really knows how to do it, and everybody thinks everybody else is doing it. Before I started working at Jibe, I worked for 5 years for an analytics company, and I can tell you that these 3 points are universally true regardless of what industry or what part or line of business inside of those industries it is. And so I want us to get today, specifically, I want us to move beyond the words, Matt. I want us to move beyond the hype, and for everybody out there, and really start to think about how recruiting I think that when you're trying to look at this enormous opportunity and you're thinking about how you're going to start to gain some value from this, I think the most important part is to think about where to start, right? No matter what, you've got to find a starting point. And, I think that I'm always surprised. We go out and we talk to a lot of clients. always shocked when I hear how what we think, are fundamental, areas of data that they should be tracking, they should have a pretty good handle on. What I would think would be the core metrics of a recruiting organization, a large percentage of the people that we interviewed and that we surveyed are telling us that they just don't have a real good handle on it. So 25% of the employees that we talk to don't know how to track source of hire. A third of the employers that we talk about don't know how to track cost per hire. Now, 60% nearly are saying that employers don't know how to track quality of hire. That one I can almost believe, because quality of hire you can see is a much more hard to define type of metric. But the first two, right? A quarter of the companies out there are not tracking source of hire. A third of the companies out there are not tracking cost per hire. Makes me believe that a lot of people out there simply just don't know how to get started. And that's really what we're trying to do here today in this webinar. And if you dig deeper into the problems, I think that people feel overwhelmed, fundamentally, right? And when people feel overwhelmed with all the information, I talk all the time to the people I work in my organization and the clients that we work with and our clients and our customers and the recruiters who actually use our tools and so forth. And it's always really interesting to me to hear them say, well, we have a lot of numbers, we just don't know what to do with it. Or we have a lot of numbers, but it's all buried in the systems that we have. And when I go talk to my boss and I try to understand, what we're doing as an organization, I never use the types of metrics that we think that are available to us. And I think that, we have to try to get beyond this whole notion that, that we're not ready for this yet. Because I think we really are, right? All of the information, this is an information-rich line of business, so that information actually exists. The fact that, 2/3 of the people in the survey don't believe that they can trust their data. 3/4 of the people out there saying that they can't share or explain the data to executives. And I'd like to just spend a moment talking about that one for people to put it in context. One of the conversations that I have with clients all the time is, we would love to spend more money on talent acquisition and recruiting, but we just don't know how to justify what those spends should look like. And one of the things that I always tell them is the way for you to grow your budgets, the way for you to go and think about how you should be articulating the value that you bring to an organization is to first invest in data, right? Because no manager in any organization is ever going to try to increase or invest in recruiting without understanding what the payback is, because it's like every investment in every organization. And so if one of the challenges that you have is that you really want to understand how you're going to get more investment from the companies that you work with, have them fund recruiting, which I always hear is an underfunded activity. I think one of the really first steps that everybody should say is I know I have a lot of information, but I have to start to invest in understanding what this data is, because presenting that information organizationally up the food chain in your organization is clearly going to be something that's going to be able to help drive that inside of your organization. So next slide. So, this is a funny way of thinking about this, right? But, I think this is a really pervasive notion inside the organizations that we work with across the spectrum of recruiting and talent acquisition organizations. So I think our message, and, I think Matt's going to take over here in a little bit, and he's going to talk about a little bit more of a practical approach here. and where folks can get started. But I think the next slide actually shows this perfectly for everybody who's involved here, which is, you know, all the information in the world is actually there. The real secret is going to be figuring out which pieces of information are important to you. And I think the number one message that you can take away from this presentation is that, you know, there are tools that are out there that are really simple to use, that are easy to set up, that don't take a huge investment, some of which are free, some of which are readily available and out there. They're going to let you find what that pink dot actually is. So don't be afraid of analytics. It isn't as scary as a big data word that is amorphous and hard to understand. But instead, it's really just about understanding what the right tools are to help you get started. And I urge all the clients out there, you know, we're going to talk a little bit later about some of our own clients, Matt, that have started on this journey and how they're actually starting to think about it. And I think everybody will be really pleasantly surprised to see, you know, how some really progressive organizations are starting to make a lot of headway here. But I think that, you know, the good first step here is to have Matt jump in here and maybe start to talk about some positive first steps that people can start to execute on today.
Right, and thank you, Ivan. I think you did a really good job kind of setting the scene. If you're in talent acquisition or recruiting, I'm going to go ahead and say the odds are pretty good you got in it to the same reason that I did, which is to say math and quantitative analytics are probably not your forte. We're people who are interpersonal, right? And that's what makes us successful in our jobs is that human element. That said, once you really start understanding how data can actually make you a better recruiter, and not only better for your clients in terms of, like, you know, basic metrics, days to fill, source per hire, quality of applicant, I would say, more than quality of hire. But once you start understanding this, you can not only justify an increased budget, but you can also start really justifying the value you bring to the organization, right? Like, recruiting is the canary in the coal mine. We all know that we're the first ones in and we're the first ones out. And sometimes we're just looked at as a giant cost center. But in fact, with big data, what you can do is you can justify the fact that, in fact, you are a cost center and you are directly contributing to an organization's greatest asset, to use the old cliche, but more importantly, making a direct bottom line impact. So I know the question is always, what's in it for me? And the answer here is really simple. You're a better recruiter, and you can prove the value that you're offering to a company. So with that, here's the long story short. Data matters. You can sit here and say it doesn't, or that, you know, statistics are skewed, you don't have the right systems, you don't have the right reporting, your numbers suck, your metrics suck, you're measuring the wrong thing, blah, 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 blah. The thing is that data is happening and it's being created on a massive, massive scale every day in every organization. Every data point that's collected within every field of your ATS qualifies as data. Every piece of reference checking that you do or pre-assessment screening, that's data. So all of this, quote, big data stuff is already out there, right? But what really is being missed is looking at it in aggregate as opposed to applying it to solve a problem. So what you need to do really to take, I would say, an actionable approach to data is to start challenging your assumptions, right? We have things that we think intuitively as recruiters work, but when you go and test the numbers, you learn a lot about what you don't know. I'll give you an example to that point that was tested on a hypothesis, and that goes back to some of those slides. It is common knowledge to everyone that recruiters and people who have to use them on a daily basis hate their applicant tracking and HCM systems, right? Like, that seems something that's very obvious. In fact, a recent poll that was done by Key Interval Research, which polled over 5,000 practitioners, actually showed 4 in 5 were okay with their systems or at least satisfied with them. I'll give you another example. We talk a lot about candidate experience, and the most recent Candidate Experience Awards from North America, which I helped put that report together, right? Obviously, we have this giant problem, and candidates hate us, and it's killing recruiting. There are some repercussions there, but when we actually looked at that survey, we found out that 4 out of 5 candidates actually were okay, satisfied, or above with the experience that they received in an employer. So those are both kind of, I think, examples of how what you know might not be exactly the case. So make sure that you have a testable hypothesis, but at the same time, eliminate all the biases that go into statistical analysis, and you'll actually be able to start driving real insights. Okay, so here's the other thing to just kind of to piggyback on that. Data is data. It's numbers. Numbers don't mean anything unless you are working in binary code. It is a complete independent entity, right? Like we operate in a world of spreadsheets. We operate in a world of very disconnected processes. So I'm tracking number of people who are hitting my ATS on one side, and then I'm tracking how many of those candidates close on another side, but there's no connection between the two. So there are 3 things. You have to have the data, right, which every organization, every recruiter on the line does. You have a way to access the data, assuming that you have an online application process. 2, you have to know what the data tells you. So it's not enough to be able to create a bunch of fancy benchmarks and pie charts and make that data look sexy. If it doesn't tell a story about what's going on in your organization, then it is worthless. It's literally a bunch of numbers. The key to really making data work is to use those quantitative numbers to tell a qualitative story and really be able to suss out where the opportunities and problems are within your process and your processes. So with that said, if you find that story and there are some, very, very obvious things that data would suggest, and, if that's not something that you can implement, then it's worthless exercise. So when approaching any big data problem, ask, what is it that the end of the day I'm trying to achieve? Because if you don't start with that, then you might find that you'll go through a whole lot of work, you'll come up with a compelling story, and then you'll be like, okay, there's actually absolutely nothing that I can do about this issue. And that happens frequently. Okay, so again, you can't manage what you can't measure. So we're measuring everything, but again, you need to start off by saying what's the problem. An example of that is we have 65% of our candidates dropping off during the application process. Okay, why is that, right? So what data would you need to prove why? I guess the answer would be, how long is it taking? What are the amount of candidates who are dropping off? Where in the process are they dropping off? How can we streamline this, and what's the minimum amount of information that we can get in order to capture the information that we need? The defining of the outcome of that would be, obviously, we're looking to increase the amount of people who start and finish our application process. But again, here's the problem. We talk a lot about building benchmarks, and I think that that's a very, very HR-centric view of the world. The fact of the matter is that the numbers are going to be very different for every organization. What's successful at a Fortune 100 global brand that's a household name, like let's say a Walt Disney company or a Procter & Gamble or something of that nature, obviously that's going to have very different benchmarks for everything in recruiting, from cost per hire to quality of hire, source, and all that, than, let's say, a startup in Silicon Valley that has 3 employees, or a manufacturing organization in Michigan that is very high volume, high turnover kind of things. So again, don't build benchmarks, but figure out, once you have that outcome, where you're starting at and what incremental changes you want to see, and constantly measure and refine. Once you do that, you can see what's working and what's not, and all of those factors, along with that proof of concept that we talked about in measurement, will help you build a business case that, to Ivan's earlier point, you can very easily take to your executive team, present to them, and say, here's what we thought, here's what we did, here are the numbers to prove it, and here's what we need to fix it. That's the best way in the world to get an investment, because ultimately the arbiter of the recruiting budget isn't your CHRO. It's probably not even your head of procurement. This all comes down to your CFO and controller, and the only thing that those guys really care about is numbers and bottom line results. So again, to go back to, I guess, a point that is nuanced, what's going to work for one company may not work for yours, but if it doesn't work, that's okay. The fact of the matter is that you're trying, and you have the data to prove why or why something doesn't, right? But the end goal of all this is that if you're doing this, you have to have a practical application, or you're really just generating more worthless numbers. And you also need to look at the types of data that are going to help meet those goals. So if it's completely extraneous, let's say you're tracking, where your online incoming applicants are coming from, but the question that you're looking for is how can we drive internal mobility or increase referrals, then you're looking at two very different sets of data to solve two very different sets of challenges. So here is the question that I would say is the million-dollar one in data-driven recruiting, which is you have these infinite pools of information that you're constantly generating. So how do you make it easy to find the data that matters to you? How do you make that small step to making big data meaningful? So with that, again, all the information in the world, all you need. It's not about size. Size doesn't matter. It's about relevance. I cannot stress that enough. So to an earlier point, you need to step back from your own bias as much as humanly possible and find the story that the data wants to tell you, not what you want it to tell you. I love that quote, and I don't think that I can understress that point. So let's take a look at some of the just most basic and easy wins and disconnects that are out there right now in the market. So just some of the baseline ways to measure, I think, recruiting efficacy are changing. When I first started recruiting, I was told that I would be judged by the amount of outgoing phone calls that I made every single day and tracked in our system. I would suggest that leaving 1 million messages that are never returned is probably not a great way to adjudicate the efficacy of any recruiter. I would say that there are so many variables involved with things like days to fill. For instance, a hiring manager goes on vacation, or you have to reschedule a candidate's interview due to an act of God like the snowstorm that's currently plaguing the entire country. I mean, these things are all kind of out of the purview of recruiters. So you really have to look at what's in your system, what you can control, and these are the easiest ones. So source of hire, job board, and source performance is really easy. If you don't know that, you're more or less shut up and take my money to every single platform that's out there. So some big questions there. Where are your hires coming from? And you think to yourself, I already know the answer to that question because people have to answer that when they apply for my jobs. Well, just like you're taking resumes off the back of job board databases, uploading them into your system, and marking them as they were direct sourced, so too do candidates try to take that self-reported data and try to make it look like it's the absolute best place for them, which is why, oh, I heard it directly from a company recruiter. And you ask them who, and they're like, oh, I don't remember. That happens so much, or at least it did to me. So again, remember that you shouldn't trust the data that's being self-generated. You should trust the data that your system's providing, which involves, again, some tools we'll talk about later. You also have to look at the quality that's coming through. It's what we call, in marketing, a marketing qualified lead. That is, does the candidates and applicants coming in from the source, it's awesome that I'm being driven 180 hires from Indeed. But at the same time, how much money am I spending with them, and are any of them qualified? Because at the end of the day, you only have to slate, let's say, 5 people for an interview and make 1 hire. So the other 95 candidates from a performance perspective really don't matter. So if you're looking at that as a pure volume metric, it's not a good metric to look at. Once you do get a better handle, and you're going to see some surprises here, to be honest with you. For instance, you'll start seeing that job boards outperform things like social media or employer branding initiatives by a significant factor. If you're like the average organization, you're likely to find that your LinkedIn recruiter license on a per hire basis is actually more expensive than if you just went out and hired a third-party recruiter at a 25% rate. If you're a Fortune 500 organization, you'll start seeing patterns like that, and that really will help you understand, okay, I have this very fixed budget to spend on positions. Where do I allocate it, and who do I cut out? And that right there will be a significant change in where you're coming, where your candidates are coming from, and what their quality is. And then similarly, where are the holes in your spending, and where are where are the candidates that you are going out and finding not coming from that you could otherwise find them? That is, an opportunity that data will show you as well. So definitely, job board and source performance is a huge benchmark. Okay, so that really, I think, comes down. This is a good big data slide. But they asked a bunch of job seekers. This was actually done. There was a poll by the Society of Human Resources Management, and they asked a bunch of job seekers, what would you rather do than fill out an online job application? People said they'd rather get a root canal, 12%, spend a day at the DMV. That sounds awesome, 19%. Speaking in front of 100 strangers, which is everyone's greatest fear if you were to look at polls, 22%. So all of this stuff that sucks, people would actually rather do than fill out an online job application. That should tell you immediately that, as an example, when you look at this data, oh, maybe I should take the emphasis off of the application and start putting it more on developing and building scalable relationships within a talent network or through referrals. So, which brings us to the application funnel. So when we look at kind of the performance, we'll talk again, how many candidates who start applications finish them? How many candidates are coming from mobile and other devices? How long does that application take? How can we optimize that process? And what I think is really important from a data perspective is to constantly be testing. It's what in marketing we call A/B testing, and you can certainly do this, very easily in recruiting. Always see what works and what doesn't, because you can take a very limited sample and use that as a pilot against a control group, which is to say your current processes. And you know what? If it doesn't work, that's cool, but at least you'll be able to figure out why and how much, I guess, that initiative failed or succeeded. So always be testing these things, but these are some of the most critical questions from the application and candidate experience process to the earlier slide that you can really look at to start figuring out how to look at the numbers you need in order to drive the applications that are qualified that you're going to need. Conversion rates. So this would come out to things like impressions to clicks, clicks to applications, applications to interviews, applications to hires. More or less, the entire goal of a lot of what we do in recruiting involves getting people to go from being a passive viewer, so somebody who, let's say, is Googling marketing jobs in San Francisco, taking the person like that, drawing them to your career site, getting them to apply, and then moving them through the funnel into a hire. That's really what it's about. So by being able to break down each of those stages in your hiring process, from a statistical standpoint, you're very much able to see where the opportunities for improvement exist, where you should be allocating your budget, and how those numbers compare year over year, job over job, function over function, to really see, again, incremental improvements or areas where change needs to be driven. And finally, is it a process issue or is it you? Because if it's you, the numbers are going to say that as well. So with that, those are just obviously some very basic metrics to get started in terms of really starting to recruit better with data. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ivan to talk through two organizations that I think are quite impressive in terms of taking some of those things that we've discussed and really turning those into actionable results. So, Ivan?
Thanks, Matt. You know, I want to go back to the very beginning here for a second, though, and put these client case studies into some context for everybody who's listening in. You know, we talked about how there's some people who feel like they're awash in data and don't know how to make sense of it. There's a lot of people who just don't know how to get going. There's a lot of people, and then as Matt took you through, you know, some starting points, right? Some places that you could really start to hone in your thinking. You know, I want to highlight how Matt just took you through things like source data or application conversion rates. Here are clients who are actually doing that. Right, here are some real big companies, and you know, if this goes back to October, last October at HR Tech, you know, you know, Jibe's gone to HR Tech a bunch of times. It's for those of you who get to go to that, it's a wild experience. There's lots and lots of people there. There's lots of presentations, and last year our strategy, our philosophy was, let's just have our customers talk instead of us. Right, we gave up all of our slots that we had as sponsors of the event to have our customers talk about it. And, you know, so Comcast and Informatica, these are presentations that they gave at HR Tech last year. One of them was a keynote address, and one of them, and the Informatica one was in our booth. So if you go to the next, one. You know, everybody knows the Comcast company. Maybe you're a cable, maybe they're your cable provider, right? What I think most people don't think about that as a company, right, is that they own NBC, they own Universal, and they own Universal Studios, and they own hundreds of other brands out there. And they think of themselves not just as the company that provides you with cable service. They think of themselves as the company that sits at the intersection of media and technology. And if you were probably thinking of what are the most important companies in the world today, you know, the ones that can lay rightful claim to sitting at the intersection of media and technology would probably be the ones where you'd want to start and think of as the most valuable entities on the planet. And you know, they've been a client of ours for a really, really long time. And if you go to the next slide, you know, they're like a lot of aggressive, progressive, pick your favorite adjective type of talent acquisition organization. They knew, right, that that their brand was going to bring in a lot of people to their website, right? Their brand, their name, who they are, was going to bring people into their career site. For them, it was about how do I now make the most out of those visitors, right? If we think of the world of recruiting transforming itself into a world that is more marketing driven, right? This is the simple, you know, conversion metrics that every marketing organization in the world spends a lot of time thinking about, right? I can get people to my website. There's a lot of mechanics associated with that. How do I get them to do something meaningful on my website? And that's really where Comcast was. They were, and you know, mobility is something, and the use of and or optimizing your mobile application process is something that, if you've seen me on Twitter, if you've seen me talk in other webinars and things like that, it's something that I just care so much about. As a company, Jibe, we care greatly about providing consumer-level user experiences on mobile devices because we think that that's where the state of the market is. And you know, so Comcast came to us with this problem, and I want to talk about really earlier in the presentation we talked about just getting started with data and picking something that you think is meaningful and measuring it and using that as a starting point. So if you go to the next slide, Matt. This was their website on a mobile device before they started working with Jibe, right? It was literally impossible for candidates to apply for a job at Comcast on their mobiles. You know, our data says up to 80% of the people out there are searching for jobs on mobile, and Comcast data was telling them that a third of the visitors to their career site were coming to the career site on a mobile device, which is amazing, which means that for a third of the people that they spent advertising dollars on, or they spent the brand advertising dollars on to get them to come to Comcast Careers, a third of them couldn't really do anything on the site. So if you go to the next slide. This is Comcast Careers today, right? And this is the Comcast Careers application process on mobile today. It is a beautiful experience. It's a consumer-level experience. It rivals the most wonderfully designed consumer mobile applications that you could possibly find. We've thought through together with them as a company all the little details associated with how do you apply for a job on your mobile phone, and the numbers that they use to govern their behavior as an organization, the ones that they present to their management team to increase the investment in their recruiting and talent acquisition function, the way that they measure their own success, the way that they drive their own behavior every single day, surprise, surprise, went up. So let's go to the next slide. So 20% more people were applying for jobs. 100,000 job seekers applied for a job. 360 hires. These are all metrics that came directly out of the analytics that we were providing to them as a company. I would say this, the investments that they made in mobile were great. They were obvious. You could go to the site on your mobile. Anybody could pick up their mobile phone and go to their career site and see what it looks like now. When we work with clients, we tell them right before we, or in the process of us getting them live on Jibe as a solution for mobile recruiting, we tell them to take a baseline. Take a month's worth of data. How many people are hitting your site on mobile? How many people are actually converting their applications? Because we want to see the before and after data, right? This is an example of a company basically just improving their lives with technology, sure, but also measuring the impact of the investments that they've made in technology for them as an organization and a business. And I think that's the most important message you can take away from here. Something really simple, right? How many people are actually applying to our jobs on mobile? If we improve the mobile experience, how many more people are actually coming? So let's go to the next slide.
Right, and if I could just add to what that also enables them to do at this point in time is to then take another step and say how much are we spending per application before, and then be able to tie that number into the ROI for that mobile program, which is a great way to get more money for your recruiting initiatives.
Yeah, it's exactly true. I think it's just an empowering force, right? And that's the message I want to get to everybody. But we weren't measuring something as complicated as in the Comcast example. We weren't measuring some esoteric metric, Matt, right? We were measuring something really simple. How many people were actually applying to jobs on a mobile? And just doing that alone, and seeing how fast that number can rise when you improve the candidate experience, that's using analytics to improve your performance, measure the ROI of investments, figure out what you should do next. You spent a little time talking about the application conversion funnel earlier on, right? One of the things that people are able to do is, in that example was, one of the things that we think through is how to get people to upload their resume on a mobile, right? If you've ever been on a normal out-of-the-box ATS application flow, you know that they say, hey, upload your resume. It's one of the earliest steps in a standard out-of-the-box ATS application flow. They assume you're on a PC, right? Local storage, I've got a local copy of this, right? Maybe your resume is on a cloud drive. Maybe you want to use your LinkedIn profile as your resume. These are things that we've integrated into the mobile application flow, and guess what? More people get through that step, right? And more people get invested in an application process. There go, more people actually complete the application process. So the numbers will guide your decisions. It isn't, and I think, Matt, you made a really good point here. It's not about the numbers themselves. It's about how you use the numbers to actually make better decisions. So Informatica is a completely different case, and I just want to make the point here is that these guys, their problems, their challenges were they recruit in the toughest market in the world for one of the most precious commodities on the planet. It is engineers in Silicon Valley. They compete with Facebook and Google and Apple for engineers. And they just, they're not as well known a brand being an enterprise software company. Being a really big enterprise software company and a really important enterprise software company, but they're not as well known as Apple, Facebook, and Google, and they compete for engineering resources with those. So for them, it was all about the process. And I'll say this is an amazing perspective for people to think about, right? Jibe has hosted 2 million plus, online job applications this year, and we've seen a really simple data correlation. The less time it takes you to complete an online job application, the more likely that online job application is to be completed. So we provided that information to our client here at Informatica, and if you go to the next slide. What they found off was that they were starting out with a 20 to 25 minute application process, and they were getting 40% drop-off really, really quickly. Their site wasn't optimized. It wasn't optimized for mobile. Go to the next slide. So we fixed that, right? And within a very short amount of time, they were getting 84% of the applications completed. Let's really put that into context now, right? More than 4 out of 5 people who start an online job application there actually got all the way through and hit submit application. That's amazing. They took the process from 20 minutes down to less than 5 minutes. And that is using data to make better decisions, right? It isn't about the data itself. It's about how it can guide your decision-making process. Do I really need that question, right? Can I take that assessment and move it to the end of the process? Where is the best place to ask this question, right? Matt talked a little bit about A/B testing, right? You can actually start to fundamentally experiment with your application process in a way that you never were able to do before to figure out specifically how to get more people to complete your online job applications. Because remember, folks, I say this all the time when I talk to clients, these numbers start to illustrate a really powerful point, right? Again, it's not about the numbers themselves, it's about the decisions that they help you make. It's about how it gives you clarity as a business owner. It isn't about getting people to start an online job application. It isn't about getting them to your career site. Those are good metrics and you should think about them. It's about how many people you can actually get to complete them, right? Because then they become viable candidates, right? So we think about all this technology and all the job boards and all the advertising and all the career site development and all the work that goes into building job descriptions and all that brand work that we do across our organizations. But at the absolutely where the rubber meets the road, where that client, that potential candidate, that potential dream candidate is the absolute closest to becoming a candidate for your organization, right? You got to close the deal. And measuring that metric has by far the greatest impact of anything else you can measure, right? How many people are starting an online job application and how many people are actually completing that online job application, and where in that process are they dropping out with a granular view of data? That is a really powerful set of ideas that can change your business completely. I love these studies. They're available on SlideShare. If you want to go up there, you can actually search for them on SlideShare. We posted them up there. The guys who gave it from those companies, we thank them always because they did great jobs at HR Tech. So next slide. I think now hopefully this is really self-evident, right? If you think about all those two clients, and those are just 2 of the dozens and dozens of clients that we work with every single day to make their worlds better. But this is big money we're talking about, right? This stuff can really make a fundamental impact on your organization. Yeah, it can make you a hero, right? But and you can look better to your managers because you've got a lot of information to help them. But if ultimately our function is to enable people to to hire great people and make that relatively simple and painless for the other constituencies in the organization, the hiring managers and the executives in the company, starting to measure some of these key metrics in your organizations, like how many people start an online job application and how many people actually completed and where your hires are coming from and how long it's taking. Starting to measure those really, really simple metrics can really translate into a lot of money for the organization. So, it's just something that I think it's an imperative and hopefully everybody, kind of takes that out of here as a really, really important metric. So.
Right, and then one thing I think through all this that we haven't stressed enough is that we tend, I think, as recruiters to look at analytics and big data approaches as being prescriptive, which is to say they're going to tell us what we're doing wrong. But on the flip side, what you also have to understand is in a lot of cases, they'll actually tell you what you're doing is working and will reaffirm the things that you're already doing. So don't look at it as, oh, this is going to tell me where I'm screwing up. It can also equally be a tool for telling you where you're getting it right. So I just do want to reiterate that point. So let's look at what are some of the benefits of implementing a big data technology. This is from Ventana Research. So again, I question any data that comes from any firm that is predicated on selling these services, but the retention of data, the speed of analysis, more accuracy, reducing or eliminating manual processes and cost savings pretty much align step for step with the challenges that we discussed earlier that recruiters are feeling are pervasive with their technologies today that solve for neither time savings, money savings, or intuitiveness. So with that, I just wanted to, and Ivan's going to chip in here, just walk through some tools that are either very low cost or free that kind of you can start using immediately without doing any major changes to put big data into action. And the first of those, and Ivan, I'm going to let you talk about this one a little because you're a marketing person by
Sure.
background, is Google Analytics. And you want to talk about a company that has big data nailed but also makes it available to you. I think this is the holy grail. So Google Analytics, why is that important?
So listen, I work in marketing. I'll tell you right now, Google Analytics is like oxygen. We couldn't live without it. It tells me everything I need to know about what's going on my website, right? So, and it's really easy to implement, and you can talk to the folks in your organization. You tag your pages, and voila, you get tons of data already pre-formatted in a way that is so simple for people to consume. Who's coming to your website? Where are they coming from? How long are they staying? What kind of devices are they actually coming on? Are they coming from search traffic? Are they coming from other URLs? Are they coming from social media? There's no more guesswork. Use this as the base level package is free that Google gives you. You do have to put some stuff on your website to make sure that the data is coming back to you. But we couldn't live without it. They have some more advanced packages that you can actually use to help. At the minimum, take a look and see how many people are coming to your site on a mobile device. I tell this as people, whenever I consult people about Google Analytics in our industry, I say one of the really cool and interesting things that you get out of the box for free is you get to see where they're coming from on what types of devices. And I guarantee you'll be shocked at what percentage of the traffic to your career site will actually coming from a mobile device. I usually tell them at that point to take out their mobile device and see what that experience is like. But definitely, it's an easy one, and for every organization out there, Google Analytics is an absolute must-have. You got to be able to at least measure this type of stuff that's going on your website.
Right, and I intentionally pulled a slide showing 2007 to show you how far back you can actually obtain this data from, because it's being created and it's been around for a while. One tool that is, like, to me, the most obvious big data thing in our industry right now is actually Glassdoor. So if you look at some of the numbers, they have 6 million user reviews, about 300,000 companies. Taking that statistical number that says would you recommend working at this company, taking those ratings, being able to know kind of what market perception is and what people are saying is good and bad about your company. Like, just think about landing on a Glassdoor page and you're seeing the power of big data in action, which is to say it's looking at hundreds and hundreds of data points to pretty much return the most useful and meaningful results for job seekers. It does that with compensation when people enter their compensation range by position. as well as a lot of very interesting marketing data, or excuse me, market data on how things stack up. So just from a pure consumer perspective, this is something your candidates are coming into contact with, but is also, you know, a tool that is free that really puts big data to work. My favorite tool, actually, from a big data perspective, that's free, actually comes from the United States Department of Labor, something we don't generally like in recruiting. But our government has actually kind of nailed a lot of market data, which is to say if you can come up with a question regarding anything from the employment rate within a particular industry in a particular market to the amount of jobs that are anticipated to be generated on private payrolls in the next quarter for a specific function or skill set, the BLS has that data, and it has it from actual sources like tax returns, WARN notices, and that other kind of government forms that you have to fill out. So if you're not using this as a way to just kind of benchmark and inform your data, definitely check out the BLS's stat site at the Department of Labor online. It's a really great tool. This is the big one, is the Candidate Experience Awards. And I know this is something I'm on the board of, we referred to earlier. Ivan's very passionate about. But if you're not already doing this, it's a no-brainer to me, because what it does is it provides direct aggregate data from candidates on how well they're perceiving your process and what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right, and how they come away thinking about that. So Ivan, I don't know if you have anything to add about why.
My favorite part about the Candidate Experience Awards is that they survey people who didn't get jobs there.
Yeah,
exactly. Right? It's not just about a job that, you know, people who got hired and then they go back and they ask people who got hired. It's they go and they ask people who didn't get the jobs to fill out the survey. And so it's an honest exchange of information. It's across a whole bunch of different. There's, you know, so many companies that are in there. So therefore, you get this really huge cross-section, and he's making this data available to everybody this year, right? So all this data is going to be available to everyone, and I love the fact that they're giving back, that they're empowering people with data, and if we could all empower people with data, that's a good thing for our industry. It's a good thing for the companies that we work with. I think this is exactly the kind of thing that people should spend an extra second and go check out what Jerry's doing on this. So.
All you have to do to get involved is just fill out an interest survey, tack something into your applicant tracking system, and they'll give you company-specific reports and findings for free, which is good consulting right there. So, and then finally, we talked a little bit about it was Jibe, which is a pretty cool analytics product. Not to sell it, but
I will say this about what we're doing, and this is what I love about what we're doing is not that we are obviously we're a software company and we're developing these tools and we've got a bunch of clients using it. It's what I love about this is that we've thought through what the consumer level experience would be. So big data doesn't need to be hard. We talked about that earlier in the day. And what I love and when I show this to people is I always show this to them on their mobile phone, and I tell them you're walking into a meeting and you've got your notebook and you've got your mobile phone with your boss, and he says, how many people have applied for this job? And where before you'd have to go and open up some spreadsheet or dump some data out of your ATS, you take out your phone, you log in, and that number is right there. And then when he asks you the next 5 questions, because he wants to drill in on that number and he wants to ask you where those people are coming from and how many people are in the process, all that information is right there. It's available on a browser, but we build everything for mobile first, and so it's a really great way for the person who lives on their mobile phone or they live with in an organization where they need to have information at their fingertips. I love the fact that we've built a consumer level experience on enterprise data.
Okay, so just those are the tools. Obviously, we've walked through a lot today. Just these are the takeaways. Talent is mobile. If you're not on a mobile device and you're not optimized for that experience, you're not reaching candidates where they're at, you're really losing out on a lot of different possibilities and potentials. One other thing, data the data you already have, it's yours, and it's free. And there are a ton of low and no cost tools that you can do to help discover what that data is. But at the same time, the processes and the tools by which you're analyzing that data are also going to be a little bit different than that Excel spreadsheet that you've always just kind of tracked manually. So again, you need to really understand that technology can help, not hurt as it often does. And then finally, what are the 3 things you need to do in order to successfully become a data-driven recruiter? Start with the numbers, operationalize those numbers, put them into action, and then continually listen to what those numbers are saying, adjust accordingly, and always be able to point to the improvements you're making, or if you're not, what factors have gone into that not working out. So 1, 2, 3, in a nutshell, pretty simple. So with that, I know we're running up against time. So as far as questions go, we have gotten quite a few of them in, I know, and we will be responding to all of those directly. So we'll be getting those to you within 48 hours. So with that, Ivan, thank you so much for attending and helping us talk through that. Everyone who registered for this is going to get a full copy of the slides as well as a recording of this presentation straight to your inbox. And I also would heavily encourage everyone to check out jibe.com/DDR. They're doing an amazing job of aggregating not product-specific content, but content from all across the industry that really is about best practices and cool stuff that people are doing in order to take data and turn it into an actual actionable recruiting mechanism. So with that, thanks very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Recruiting Daily webinar.